Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me again. My name is Douglas Grummins, and today's talk will be continued reading from the book From Sex to Superconsciousness by Osho, and some of my own thoughts mixed in as well. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to come out and talk about matters such as sex or death, or because normally these matters are considered to be taboo, and it's a bad juju to openly talk about these things. So let's keep in mind that these talks that I'm be sharing with you today are for mature audiences only. And when I say mature audiences only, I mean those that have dove into the world of meditation or even greater, some understanding about Tantra. So please keep in mind, it's just like the alchemy of turning coal into a diamond. I mean, it takes immense heat and pressure and time to convert a piece of a hunk of coal into a diamond. But if it is possible to turn coal into a diamond, then it is also possible to go from sex and elevate your energy that was at one time sexual, and elevate it into a higher form of consciousness and into what's called super consciousness. So, in other words, turning a piece of coal into a diamond. So I ask of you to be a little open, a little understanding, a little caring, and a little compassionate, and you'll understand that what I'm talking about is not just the future of yourselves, but also the future of humanity as well. And with those notes and with those thoughts, I will open up the book, and we're going to start off on page 167. From Sex to Superconsciousness was quite a crazy book that Osho put out back in the 70s, and it defined not just who Osho was, but it gave the whole world a deeper understanding of where we went wrong with sexual energy. So Osho says on page 167, we'll just pick up right there. It says, "I request you to approach sex only when you are feeling bliss, feeling love, when you are feeling cheerful, and when you are prayerful. Only when you feel that your heart is full of joy, peace, and gratitude. Only a person who approaches sex like this can experience superconsciousness, samadhi. If even one ray of samadhi is attained in sex, you become free from sex forever and start evolving into superconsciousness. The meeting, the union of a woman and a man has a deep, profound meaning. It is the union of a woman and a man that the ego shatters for the first time, and one meets, or really meets someone. The child leaving its mother's womb is in great distress. It is like a tree being uprooted from the soil. Its whole being yearns to rejoin with the earth. Its attachment to the earth meant its life, its vitality, its nourishment. It has been uprooted, and it clamors to go back. For now, it has been severed from the lifeline. A child being born is being cut off from its roots. And in a sense, the child becomes uprooted, separate from life, from existence. Now the child's entire longing, the thirst of the child's whole being, is to be reunited with life, with existence. It is this longing which we call the thirst for love. What else do we mean by love? Everyone is wanting to be loved and to be loved itself. What is the meaning of love? The meaning is I have become isolated, disconnected. I want to be reunited with life. And one of the deepest experiences of that reunion happens between a man and a woman in sex. Sex is the first experience of the reunion. The person who understands this experience of meeting in the sense of a thirst for love, a desire for reunification with life itself, with existence itself, can soon attain to another experience as well. A meditator, a spiritual seeker, a mystic, an enlightened one all unite, and a person moving into sex also unites. In sexual intercourse, two individuals unite. One individual unites with another and becomes one. And in samadhi, in enlightenment, an individual meets or unites with the whole and becomes one with it. And sexual intercourse is a meeting between two individuals, and enlightenment is a meeting between an individual and the infinite whole. Naturally, a meeting between two individuals can be momentarily, but the meeting of an individual with the whole is forever. Two individuals are finite beings, and hence their union cannot be infinite, cannot be forever. And this is the pain, this is the misery of all matrimony, of all love, that we cannot unite with a person forever. We unite together for a moment, but again we fall back to a distance. The gap enters. The distance creates pain. It hurts, and so lovers are in a continuous state of despair over it. Slowly, it begins to appear as if the other person is creating this distance. Hence the anger, the irritation over the other begins to arise. But those who know would say two people are essentially two separate individuals. They can force a momentary meeting, but they cannot meet forever. This is the very pain and hurt that gives birth to a constant conflict between lovers, that begins a tussle with every person who loves. A tension, a strife, a feeling of aversion creeps in, because it begins to seem as if the other doesn't want to merge, and so the merger does not become complete. But no individual is to blame for this. Two persons cannot meet on the same level of forever. Persons can merge only momentarily because the individual is limited. The individual's merger will also be limited. The eternal merger can only be with the divine, with the whole existence. And those who move into the deepest depths of sex come to feel that if a moment's merger can give such bliss, what must be possible in the eternal merger is beyond measure. If the merger of a moment brings such an amazing experience, what then? And how much more amazing will the experience of a merger with the divine be, with the eternal be? It is like sitting in front of a lit candle trying to imagine how many candles light there must be in the sun. The attempt at comparison is hopeless. A candlelight is such a tiny thing, and the sun is so immense, about 60,000 times bigger than our Earth. Although it is 93 million miles away, it heats us, it scorches us. So how can we possibly estimate the difference between light of a candle and the light of the sun? But no, it is possible to measure the light of the sun in terms of the light of a candle. No matter how difficult, because the candle is infinite and so is the sun. The figure may be inconceivable, yet it is possible to compare. But it is impossible to measure the difference between the bliss of orgasm and the bliss of samadhi. Sex is a merger of two tiny individuals very momentarily. Samadhi, superconsciousness, is the merger of the drop with the ocean of the boundless whole. And there is no way to compare them, no unit to measure the magnitude of this union with the whole. So when this has been attained, then what sex, what intercourse, what desire? When such an infinity has been attained, who will think of attaining that momentary pleasure? At this stage, that pleasure feels like a suffering. That pleasure feels like a madness. Here, that pleasure appears like a waste of energy, and celibacy draws spontaneously on a person of such attainment. But there is a bridge, a route, a journey between sex and superconsciousness. Superconsciousness is the final rung up in the sky of the same ladder of which sex is the first rung. And those who turn against the very first rung never progress further ahead at all. I want to say to you that those who deny the very first rung of the ladder can never step on the second. And I also want to say to you that it is necessary to step on this first rung with consciousness, understanding, and awareness. This is not so that you remain stuck on that rung. It is so that by placing your feet on it, that you can go past it. But a strange accident has happened with the human race. As I said earlier, it has turned against the very first rung, and yet it wants to reach the final rung without experiencing the very first rung, without experiencing the light of the candle. It wants to claim the light, the splendor of the sun, and this is never possible. We have to learn to understand the dim light of the candle given to us by nature, a light which lives for a moment and then is put out by a gentle breeze. In order to develop a true longing for the sun, then the steps toward the sun can truly begin. Then the thirst, the discontentment can be felt, and the desire for longing for the sun can truly be born in us. From a small experience of music, it is possible to move toward the infinite, the ultimate music. From the experience of a little light, it is possible to move toward infinite light. Knowing one drop is the first step toward knowing the whole ocean. And our knowledge of the minutest atom reveals the energy of matter. But although we are freely endowed by nature with minute atoms of sex in the form of sexual energy, we do not recognize and explore this energy at all. We somehow live with our eyes closed to it, our backs turned to it. We don't totally accept sexual energy in our hearts. We know of no available alchemy in order to live it and enter deeply into it with bliss and gratitude. And as I said to you, the day humankind comes to know what that alchemy, it will be able to give birth to a new man. And in this context, I want to say to you that man and woman are two different poles, the positive and the negative poles of energy. A right meeting of those two poles completes a circuit. It is a kind of harmony, a melody. I also want to say to you that if the depth and duration of intercourse can last long enough, if a woman and a man couple can stay in intercourse for over half an hour, a halo of light is created around them. Then when the body electricity of the two meet deeply and totally, then in a darkness, a glow of light is seen around the couple. Some remarkable researchers have done work in that direction, and they have taken photographs of couples who attain to the experience of such an electric halo that transcends sex forever. But this is not your experience, and such statements would seem strange to you. This is not our experience. But if this is not your experience, it means only one thing. Think about it again. Take a fresh look. Begin your life again, at least your sex life, from ABC. About understanding this, about conscious living, my own experience and my own opinion is that Mahavira or a Buddha or a Christ or a Krishna are not born accidentally. Their birth is the outcome of the total union of two people. The deeper the union, the more amazing and extraordinary the offspring, the shallower, the more incomplete the union. The worse, the more downtrodden the offspring. Today, the caliber of human beings is sinking lower and lower, and some people blame it on the deterioration of moral standards, while others attribute it to the effects of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. But all this talk is nonsense, false and worthless. There is only one thing different. The quality of sex has fallen. Sex has lost its sacredness. Sex has lost its scientific understanding, its simplicity, its naturalness. Sex has degenerated into a forced thing, a nightmare. Sex has taken almost a violent status. It is no longer a loving act. It is no longer a sacred and peaceful act. It is no longer a meditative act. And because of this, humanity will go on falling downwards. If an artist, a sculptor, is making a statue and he is drunk, do you expect him to create a beautiful work of art? If a dancer is dancing full of anger and in a restless and worried state of mind, do you expect a scintillating performance from that person? The quality of the outcome of anything we do depends on that state of mind that we are in. Sex has been the most neglected area regarding this fact. And the wonder of wonders is that it is the phenomenon on which the procreation of life depends, through which newer souls enter this world. You may not be aware that sex only creates a situation into which, if all is suitable, a soul descends. You only create the opportunity. You do not give life to a child. You only provide an opportunity for it to come into the womb. depending on the quality and the suitability of the opportunity, a certain soul enters. And if you have provided a sick opportunity, if at the time of intercourse you were in anger, or you were in guilt, or in anxiety, or in anguish, the soul that chooses to enter the womb will be the form of the same level of consciousness. It cannot be from a higher level. I know this all sounds a little crazy. These words come in this commercial, but stay with me. It really does start to make sense and really make you wonder, is all this true? So back to Osho's words. To invite a higher soul, the circumstances and milieu around sex must also be of a higher quality. Only then can superior souls be born. And only then can the level of humanity's consciousness be ultimately raised. That is why I say that the day humanity becomes thoroughly acquainted with the entire science of sex, the entire art of sex, the day we are able to impart on that science, the art of young and old alike, to the whole world, will be able to give birth to a new man. From Nietzsche to Arbendino, call Superman, who can be called the great soul. And such a child, such a world can be created. And until we are able to create such a world, there can be no peace in the world. Until then, there will be no end to wars and hatred. Until then, immortality, corruption, licentiousness cannot be eradicated. And the present darkness in life cannot be wiped away. Many politicians shout a million slogans. Don't worry, a couple of minutes of rain won't make a big difference. Close your umbrellas, because most others don't have umbrellas. It would be very irreligious that a few people open their umbrellas and close them. If all people had umbrellas, then it would have been okay, but others don't have. And if you sat there with your open umbrellas, how ridiculous, how uncultured it would be. So close them. Yes, there is shelter over me, but for as long as you would be sitting in the rain after the meeting, I can stand in the rain for that long. Wars will not cease. Tension will not ease. Violence and jealousy will not disappear. How much time has passed? For the last 10,000 years, the messiahs and the Tirthankas and the avatars have preached against war, against violence, against anger, but nobody has ever listened. On the contrary, we murdered, we hung on to the cross, the very people who preach love, non-violence, and non-anger. And this has been the outcome of their teachings. Gandhi taught us to practice non-violence, to be loving, to live in harmony with each other and together. And we rewarded him with bullets. And this was the net result of his teachings. All of humanity's great men, noble souls, have failed. And this should be clear to us. They have been unsuccessful. None of the ideas and values envisioned and promoted by them have won. All their values have been defeated. They have failed. The greatest of callers and the noblest of people have all failed, have all perished, and human beings have go on falling deeper and deeper into darkness, into more miserable hells. Doesn't this show that there has been some basic flaw in their teachings? The restless person is restless because of being conceived and born in restlessness. Such a person carries the germ of restlessness in the very depths of his being. He carries the disease of restlessness. On the very first day of his birth, the person arrives carrying restlessness, suffering, and pain. In the very first moment of his conception, the whole map of his life has formed. With this person, Buddhas will fail. Mahaviras will fail, Christ will fail, Krishnas will fail. They have all failed. And out of a sense of etiquette and politeness, we may not say it openly, and that is a different matter, but they have all failed. The human race has become more and more inhuman day by day. In spite of so many teachings about nonviolence, love, and peace, we have only bettered ourselves by advancing from one simple dagger to the hydrogen bomb. Would you call this success of the teaching of nonviolence? We killed about 30 million during the First World War, and after that, followed by a period of talk about peace and love, we killed about 75 million people in the Second World War. Again, after that, from Bertrand Russell to Vinoba, all go on shouting for peace, and we go on preparing for a third great war. And in comparison, this war will make the previous ones seem like they were child's play. Somebody once asked Einstein what might happen in the Third World War, and Einstein said he could foretell nothing about the Third World War, but that he could predict something about the Fourth World War. Surprised, the questioner asked how. If he could not say anything about the Third World War, could he predict anything about the Fourth? Einstein replied that the one thing was certain about the Fourth World War, and that it would never be the Fourth War, because there was no possibility of a single person would survive the third. This is the fruit of man's moral and religious teaching. Osho continues on by saying, I want to say to you that the basic cause lies elsewhere. Unless and until we can bring a deep understanding and harmony to the act of sex, unless we can make it a spiritual door to superconsciousness, a better humanity cannot come into being. Unless this happens, humanity will go on becoming worse and worse, because today's children will later go through sex and produce children worse than themselves. The quality of each new generation will be worse and worse, and this is certain. This at least can be prophesied. But we have already reached to such a low level that there is most likely no further to descend. The whole world has already become a huge madhouse already. And from statistics they have compiled, American psychiatrists have deducted that only 18% of the population of New York City can be said to be mentally normal. Only 18% are mentally normal. Then, what is the condition of the remaining 82%? They are in a state of near insanity. Sometime sit down in a quiet corner and consider your own state. You'll be surprised to know the amount of madness hidden inside you. Somehow you keep it controlled and suppressed, but that is a different matter. A slight push, and any man can easily go mad. It is quite possible, or probable, that in 100 years' time, the entire world will become one enormous madhouse. Of course, on one hand, there will be many advantages. We won't need any treatment for insanity. We won't need psychiatrists to treat neurotics. Nobody will feel that anybody is mad, because the first symptom of a madman is that he never realizes that he is mad. This sickness is ever on the increase. This ailment, this mental ill health, this mental anxiety and darkness is ever on the rise. And shall I say to you that unless sex gains a spiritual connotation, a spiritual status, a new humanity can never be born. And I spoke about these things to you in the last 3 days, and certainly a new man has to be born. The human soul, anxious to scale the heights, to rise to the sky, to be illuminated like the moon and the stars, and to bloom like the flowers. A human soul is thirsty and crying for music, for dance. But man moves around and around like an ox on a treadmill and ends his life in it. He is unable to break out of it. What must be the cause? There is only one cause, and that is that the present process of procreation is absurd. It is full of madness, and this is why we haven't been able to make sex a door to superconsciousness. Human sex can become a door to superconsciousness in these 3 days. That all I have said is only about this great truth. And may I repeat one point in the very end to conclude today's talk. I want to make it absolutely clear that people shying away from the truths of life are enemies of humanity. Someone who says to you, don't ever even discuss sex, is humanity's enemy. These are enemies who have not allowed people to think about it, to reflect upon it. Otherwise, how is it possible that we have not yet developed a scientific attitude towards sex? Someone who says to you that sex has no relation to religion is 100% incorrect, because it is the energy of sex in a transformed and sublimated state that enters the realms of religion. The upward rising of energy of sex takes us to realms that we have no idea of, realms where there is no death, where there is no sorrow, where there is nothing but bliss. This state of pure bliss that Osho talks about is the state of enlightenment, the final rung of the ladder. but there are rungs to the ladder that you may not be aware of and may not know much about, because society has kept these things from us and not really wanting us to explore these things, because in the past priests have said that sex is the opposite direction towards divinity, when in reality it is the correct direction. It's just the first rung of the ladder, the very first rung of the ladder. Osho comments in his book that sex is the very first rung of the ladder, and his comparison is that don't be scared of the first rung. You have to start from somewhere, and really, in reality, you have to start from where you are right now. And if you observe yourself and examine yourself and come to a self-realization that you are rooted in sex and sex energy. You don't have to call it sex, though. It could be called lovemaking. That kind of reduces the implication of such a dirty thing. And sex is not a dirty thing. It's just something that has to be experienced and transformed and not suppressed in any way. The only way to go beyond it is to go through it. That's the only real way. And let me read what Osho says on page 196 of his book, From Sex to Super Consciousness. Osho says, if humanity has become debased, if it has become perverted and insane about sex, mad about sex, the responsibility is not on those who have reflected and meditated on the subject, have cultivated some knowledge about sex, but on the moralist, on the religious people, saints and clergy who have for thousands of years tried to keep man encased in ignorance. Humanity would have been freed from sexuality long ago, but this was not to be. And this was not to be because of those who have been trying to keep the ignorance about sex intact. I felt that if just a little ray of truth created so much restlessness in people, then it was right to discuss the full spectrum, to clear up the question of whether knowing makes man religious or irreligious. And this is the reason I chose this subject. Had this not been so, it would not have suddenly occurred to me to choose this subject, because perhaps I would not have talked on this topic at all. I'm going to condense now some of the other thoughts in Osho's book, From Sex to Superconsciousness, so that we have enough time in this session to fit everything in. But Osho is basically saying to go into sex, to go into the deeper levels of sex, is a deeper understanding of life's essence. And it all starts with the first rung of the ladder, which means is physical sex. Physical sex is just basically something that doesn't go any higher than the physical level. It's just a gratification of the body. Like when a prostitute has sex with a man, it never goes beyond the physical level. And then the next rung up in the ladder is called psychological sex. And psychological sex is where sex goes into the mind and starts transforming your mind into higher levels. It's not just physical now. Now the mind has entered into it, and the heart has entered into it as well. And it starts the heart's path of growth and opportunity for advancement in the spiritual realms. But then the next level up is the spiritual level. Osho calls it spiritual sex. I could say at the same time you could call it spiritual love. But basically what Osho's saying is in the moment of orgasm, when each person in the couple has an orgasm, the experience is egolessness and timelessness. You experience a moment of meditation, in other words, a meeting with the divine, a meeting with God, but it's very brief, very momentary, a second or two at the most. The moment one achieves an orgasm is also the same moments that are experienced in what we call samadhi. And samadhi is a very deep state of meditation. It's a complete union with the divine. And when you become enlightened, also, then this I would have to try to almost describe as ultimate sex, but it's and to use the word sex makes it sound a little weird. But this ultimate meeting, the union, the same union that happens when you have sex with another person, in enlightenment, happens to you for the rest of your life. This moment of timelessness, egolessness exists, and the way to go through all this and to obtain it is to use a door like Tantra and the experiences and the techniques that you learn in Tantra. but it goes from the physical to the psychological, onto the spiritual. And this spiritual sex, you also, in a sense, feel like you're more than just the partner of the person that you're in love with and making love with. It in a sense, you feel like you're almost like one, and no longer two. But anyway, we'll pick this up again. Maybe we'll talk about some of the techniques in the Book of Secrets, and going over some tantric techniques to elevate levels of sexual energy and promote spiritual growth at the same time. Anyway, you guys take care of yourselves. It's nice talking with you again. Hope this one didn't weird you out too much. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.